Hello everyone, I'm Leslie Maltman and welcome to Reimagining events. This series of webinars has been developed by Tourism NI to support the events industry as we look forward to a time in the not too distant future where we can once again get together to share the live experiences we all miss so much. We know we need to do things in a different way and from a new perspective. And these sessions are designed to help us navigate the way ahead in a post-pandemic world. Today's webinar looks at hybrid and virtual events. And first of all, we're going to be joined by Sophie Brookes, who is a specialist in this area of event delivery. With a background in event production, Sophie has worked more closely with clients in the last year to develop their hybrid and virtual event solutions. A fan of exploring cities and countryside alike, Sophie rates Edinburgh, Kilkenny and the Scottish Highlands amongst her favourite places to visit in the UK and Ireland. Sophie believes in the importance of human interaction and can't wait to get back to being part of a live event team almost as much as spending time with family and friends, enjoying great food, music and dancing. After Sophie's presentation, we're delighted to be joined by Chris McCreary and Sarah Jones to talk to us about the challenges and triumphs of delivering the Northern Ireland Science Festival, which was held in February this year. After that, there'll be a Q&A session with Sophie, Sarah, Chris and myself all together. Thank you to those who've submitted questions already, and please do feel free to add any further questions in the chat box during the session. Without further ado, Sophie, over to you.
Hello. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today to have a look at hybrid and virtual. I'm just going to take control of the presentation. There we go. So hi, yes, I'm Sophie. I have worked in event production for about 9 years, but primarily in hybrid and virtual over the last year, supporting our clients, such as yourselves, to get their events online. Today, I was so excited to be invited to talk about hybrid and virtual because while we understand that the events community have had to move to an online platform for their events, I've actually worked in hybrid and virtual so much longer than the last year. And so, as well as looking at some of the really important questions to ask when you're moving to hybrid and virtual, and then as you transition back to your live event, I also want to take the opportunity today to look at the benefits of online and maybe how you can encompass them in the future as we go back to a live event. So I'm just going to make full screen. There we go. Right. So what will we be exploring today? I'm going to open today by looking at hybrid and virtual terminology. What's the difference? Primarily so that everyone's really clear on what I'm talking about. I'm then going to move into your event and being an opportunist, shaking up your event, and whether or not this could actually be the chance for all of us here today to stop rinsing and repeating and actually see how we could improve our events for the future, both when we're online and when we go back to being in person. Platform choice will be the next thing we have a look at. I know we've already had a couple of questions in to Leslie before the session started today, and a lot of people asking questions about what platform to use, how to pick a platform. So we're going to do a couple of slides on that before we move into programming. So having a look at your event format, programming and content, and how that can transition to the world of online, then hybrid, and then back into in-person events successfully. Finally, before I hand over to Leslie, who'll go then to Chris and Sarah, I want to have a quick look at the secondary benefits of hybrid and virtual. So some benefits which at first we might not have imagined, but that could actually be really apparent for your event. So hybrid and virtual terminology. More than the last year, but certainly over the last year, I have seen a number of meetings, presentations, proposals and pitches go awry because fundamentally it's as simple as everyone in the room is not on the same page when we're talking about terminology. It makes it very hard for you to work with suppliers. It makes it really hard for you to pick a platform, and it can be a stumbling block when starting to plan your event. I'm not saying that the terminology that I'm using today is cut and dry terminology for the industry, but this is how I understand it, and this is what I'll be referring to for the next sort of 15-20 minutes. So for me, there's two types of hybrid and then one virtual. There's hybrid one, where your performance, your festival performance, your everyone doing any kind of performance at the event, they are live, they are there in your venue, in your arena. Your tech crew and your tech team are all going to be there, and probably some organisers. But your entire audience are watching it remotely. They are all engaging with your content online. Hybrid 2 is, I think, what we're really trying to transition through as we move back to the live event arena, where people are there in person. So this is as above, but with a reduced audience. And as we're all quite aware, that will very much be stipulated based on legislation at the time and what's allowed. Third is obviously virtual. So third is all content is either private streamed or pre-recorded, and there's a tech team in a studio streaming that seamlessly online. The terminology you use isn't necessarily the most important thing, and if your understanding and my understanding differs, that's not a problem. The main thing is, as you move forward with your event, if you are looking to engage an online element, is that before you start conversation, before you start quoting and bookings, is that you ensure everyone's on the same page and that everyone's understanding the terminology the same way. Okay, this was actually one of the first things I spoke to Leslie about when I was looking to do this presentation, and it was the concept of rinse and repeat in live events. So I've worked with clients for years, and I think I very regularly get an email correspondence or a meeting request that sort of starts with a slightly jovial line, "It's that time of year again." You know, and as you read through briefs, as you start to look at the planning stages of events, you very much get the sort of phraseology such as "just the same as last year," or "base it on the 2019 programme," or "we'll just do the same format." If you have an event that you've put a model together and it works really well, it's successful and it's growing, I'm not saying you should change it. But the events industry has been forced into a time of change over the last year, and we've had to react to survive. And so if you are rinsing and repeating, it will be a really good opportunity to actually not say, how can I run my event online, but why am I running my event? What is the event objective? And if you can reconfirm those, you will undoubtedly reap benefits both as you move through hybrid and virtual, but also back into the live event sphere. I think an offshoot of this as well, and this will kind of, I think, be reiterated when Chris and Sarah are talking to us later, is to stand back and actually have a look at the event industry around you, the wider industry, festivals and live events. What are people doing? How are they advertising it? And can you take any inspiration from that when you're planning your event? So one of the things which we were asked a lot about was platform choice. Absolute disclaimer, I'm not going to tell, I'm not going to go into specific platforms during this, but what I am going to do is run through my experience and the list of very important questions and considerations when picking a platform for your event. You may already have a platform and be looking to choose. You may also be looking to change slightly the service that you're given, and I hope that these will be an important list to kind of get the mind whirring about what you could be asking your supplier. So the first thing I wanted to touch on was cost contracts and payment caps. Also goes into their payment terms. So the events industry has been wildly put under pressure over the last year in relation to funding and survival when events in person couldn't take place. The cost of platforms to get online varies massively, but I have found that my experience and the experience of my clients is that a lot of platforms are trying to ask yourselves as events organisers to buy in for the long term. So we're really being asked to, we can do this deal for you, but it'll be, but you must buy in for 24 months. And for people in the events industry at the moment, that is absolutely terrifying. We don't know what's around the next corner, let alone making a financial commitment for 24 months. I would say everyone that I have pushed back on has been successful. platform providers are looking to form long-term positive relationships, and they are their ears are very open to hear the situation you're in. Fundamentally, they would like your business. So I would say definitely push back. If there's a line on the contract which says, and it must be over 24 months, have the conversation with them. I would say the next thing is very much experience. So a lot of platforms have just got corporate experience. Some are focused very much on exhibition, but have they actually run an event like yours? Have they run an outdoors event? Have they run a festival? Really getting that kind of experience, evidence from them is so important. Can they show you? Was it recorded? What did that look like? And also, if they have previous clients, can those clients either touch base with you or provide you with some testimonials? The next thing is audience data capture, and the next two actually tie in together. So, voting and interactive needs and audience data capture. We tend to find that when it comes to the live event and your audience are walking around, it could be that data is not actually at the forefront of your mind, and it's not necessarily something which has been a priority. But one of the most important things that we found is that platforms should be able to give you drop-off data. So that is during a 4-hour session of an afternoon, when did everyone engage? And when did everyone either leave their computers, go and make a cup of tea, whatever, because that will be so essential for your programming in the future. The next thing is very much audience experience. I would say every single platform that I've interacted with, every single platform I've contracted and used, I ask for a full demo. And I really want to go in there, sense check, understand the look and feel, and understand the functionality. End to end, what is your audience journey going to look like when they're viewing your event through this platform? And yeah, I think if a provider wants to work with you, it's definitely something that they should be willing to do with you and do that demo. It very much ties into the next point of virtual space. So if you were looking to use an outdoor arena, an outdoor space, or a multi-room venue, you would very much want to understand the capacities, capabilities, and limitations. And this is the same for a virtual space, whether it be hybrid and you're going to have some people in the room, or whether it be totally virtual. It's important for you to know the capacities and caps before you contract in with somebody. The next part is very much sponsorship and branding. I imagine we would all agree that sponsorship and that kind of support is probably more important for the event sector than ever at the moment, both over the last year and as we move back into welcoming people back to our events. How can the online event be monetized? I think this is very much something which the series has looked at more broadly during Reimagining events, and it's an important question to ask. Is it brandable? Is there a brandability? And also, what do your sponsors want? So certainly opening up that communication with them. So the second part of platform choice that I wanted to have a look at is whether or not it should be done in-house or whether or not you should work with a production company. I am mindful that I come from a production background, but my take on this isn't biased. It really is dependent on your event. And I think it very much comes down to a cost-benefit analysis. There's not necessarily in events at the moment a huge amount of additional budget. So if it can be afforded or if it can be worked into the budget, then the benefits may sort of prove long-term gain from an audience and an engagement perspective. It could well be that you're already working with a production company and they are able to pivot into the hybrid and virtual world, and they may actually also either run or own a platform. So that's definitely a question worth asking, whether you work with them now or you worked with them previously. Production companies are obviously incredibly keen for work. They have been sort of on a bit of a standstill, like the rest of us, over the last year. So you're likely to forge some fantastic relationships there. If you don't go through a production company and you are going to deliver in-house, it's worth having a very realistic look as to the skill sets and capacities that you have, and is that actually available within your show team. It could be that you take it as a different opportunity, that you bring in an apprentice or someone else to join your team and run that element of the show. But their capabilities and their technical knowledge would need to be of a fantastic level, but that would be sort of through your recruitment. I would definitely say through clients who I've spoken to, the visual quality and the audience experience through the production quality of using a production company is notable. And if you can find the budget for it, it would be worth considering when planning your event. The subsidiary services that production companies can offer, whether that be pre-production recording, post-production edits, managing the technical rehearsals. I know Barry today has been running fantastic rehearsals for all of us and being patient with me in my presentation. So that kind of support for you and your team is really worth considering engaging with if you can. So then we have a look at programming and content. Of the various webinars and sessions that I've joined personally, this is a really, really hot topic because, as you are all today, we've all spent a lot of time sat in front of computers, whether that be in meetings, on Zooms, on family Saturday night quizzes, and it's something that everyone has had a lot of experience and exposure to now. So your audience journey is really, really different, and how to keep people engaged when the attention span is lower, when they may have children home working, they could have a dog barking, the Amazon man might be delivering a parcel, it's a massive thing for you to consider in your programming and your content and how you format your event. So I wanted to put together a couple of ideas as to how to keep your audience online and engaged. I think the first part certainly is interactive content. Again, this may not be something that you had at any level of interaction, particularly when your event was live, but now it's about actually having, it's not just a one-way viewing experience. If it's an exchange of experience with your audience, then that's a fantastic opportunity. It also then gives you two subsidiary things. You can get data, you can get some feedback, which, as we're all learning and growing what the audience wants, is essential. But it also gives you opportunities to hold competitions and engage with the audience, maybe on behalf of your sponsors. Maybe they want to do something interactive and a giveaway, so that's another opportunity there. I would say from a programming perspective, a really important thing would be to look at pre-recorded content. I believe this is something that Chris and Sarah are going to look at as well, but offering your audience some visual variety really will keep them more engaged. It will if your event runs in the day, you could offer some content at night. You can also then only hire one event or space, but pre-record other content elsewhere, which gives your actual live technical setup a lot less pressure because you can have one stream and then show other content. You will also really be thanked by your technical team. The programming benefits of inserting pre-recorded content and the quality and the professionalism and how smooth those transitions then are is undeniable. And also your performers will be probably thrilled, because even this now, talking to people online, performing online is quite an intense experience. And for some of your performers, if they can pre-record that and check it or re-record it and edit it, the actual baseline quality of your event that will be raised up and will be, it will be really quite notable when you watch back the overall event. I have actually popped in here as well the storytelling of Glastonbury. So we have done a previous session in the Reimagining event series on storytelling. If you haven't had a chance to see that, I would definitely recommend going back and watching it online. It's a massive thing at the moment that events, live events, festival events are more than just what's actually on the stage, what's happening. Have a little Google of what Glastonbury are doing for this year. They've started very much a drip feed of marketing. It's really about the journey through the event, whether that be they've actually filmed a walkthrough and the different areas and the different stages. And I think immersing your audience as much as you can through that pre-event work is so important. So finally, the last little bit I would like to look at with you today, we're looking at the secondary benefits. I think it's really important now to say that I am, as we said at the beginning, I, as much as anybody else, would like to go back to in-person events I miss it massively. The networking, the buzz, the audience experience, it is undeniable. But while this is the reality, I think there's a couple of benefits for us to embrace and then hopefully take forward as we do transition back to the live event arena. I would say one piece of advice, which I can't stop giving to people when they ask, is that having a degree of your event being online is so much easier to scale if the worst happens than none. So even if you are determined to be 95% hybrid and you would like to have your audience back, you've worked out the social distancing, everything's, it's all good to go ahead. Having engaged with a platform and having your technical team or production company up to speed on that will mean that if we have to, as an industry, last minute react to changes around us that are outside of our control, scaling that up from 5% to 100 seems like a big thing, but it is so much easier to do than actually then having to go out there and do all the work we talked about earlier in this presentation, see the demos, get the testimonials. You simply won't have time. The next part is very much accessibility. So the possibility that by moving your event online, you could target and engage with an audience who either could or wouldn't have previously interacted with you. This could be because of working, this could be because they simply hadn't heard of your event. And there's also an element of maybe it will be people who are watching internationally and simply wouldn't have travelled at the time to come over and take part in person. That being said, if this audience really enjoy your event, you could also be building your in-person audience of the future. So really worth engaging them now and then hoping they attend when we come back to being live. The final part as well was just that online content it's very much a showcase, both for your event and as Northern Ireland as a tourist destination. So that's really worth leading into and taking advantage. And even if you do the event yourself in-house, there's the consideration of moving to either a videography company or a production company, just to, at the very end, put together that material so that that can be kept online and used as marketing in the future. So really worth leaning into. So yeah, they are all of my points. I believe that is the end of my presentation. It is. Thank you. So I'm going to hand back. Thank you all very much for listening.
Thank you much, Sophie. That's great. I think that was a really good overview of this new world that frankly can just seem quite terrifying at times. Because so many of us are used to being in a space, eyeballing people, delivering something which, yes, there may be a production element and you have a production team sitting behind a desk, but it's not like this. Now we're going to hear from a couple of people that I'm really quite jealous of, because they have been able to deliver an actual real life festival in this new world that we have. Chris McCreary is the founder, director and chief exec of the Northern Ireland Science Festival. In his spare time, Chris loves apparently perfecting his golf swing and listening to podcasts on, wait for it, wrestling, science, music and everything in between. Sarah Jones is the digital program lead for this year's Science Festival, and she's over 20 years experience working in events. In normal times, Sarah loves nothing more than being at the front of a crowd at a gig with a beer in her hand, as I would say do 90% of the attendees here. So thanks for being with us, Chris and Sarah, over to you.
Brilliant, thank you, Leslie. Great to be here, and thank you all for tuning in. So yeah, as Leslie introduced, I'm the founder and director of the Science Festival. Sarah has been the real brains of the organisation over the past year. He's been our digital program lead. I'll do a bit of talking and I'll bring Sarah in at various points. So let me see. So for those who aren't aware about what the Science Festival is in normal times, the Science Festival started 2015. And it's now become the sort of second largest event of its kind in Europe, just behind Edinburgh Science Festival. What it's about is trying to raise the level of science capital in society through very much programmed like an arts or a music festival, but with science, technology, engineering, maths, and the arts at its core. And normally it's a big sprawling beast of a festival. It's spread across 90 venues, ranging from the SSE Arena down to small theatres, museums. We do a regional theatre tour. We kind of pride ourselves in the fact that it's the one festival that you can start the morning in a cave, go to a beach, go to a museum, go to a theatre, and then go to the black box at night and go to a live gig. So normally it's very spread out. We normally hit around 70,000 tickets sold every year. And it's very much focused on hands-on activity a lot of the times. So places like W5 will have exhibitions where kids are, up to their elbows in slime or soldering and things like that there. But of course, we do a lot of debates, film, theatre, music. So that's what the festival is in normal times. But obviously, these aren't normal times. I'm just going to play a quick video here, which is the trailer for the festival that's just passed. So if you want to hit that play button, Barry. Okay. Should work. There we go. So our 2021 program, a lot of what previous Sophie's just said in the last talk resonated very strongly with us, because we fell into the trap, I guess. When COVID hit, we were quite lucky. February 2020 festival was probably one of the last major festivals to take place in Northern Ireland before everything started, the sky started falling in. But we started falling into the trap, at that point of going back in previous programs and trying to see what content could just be shifted online. And it was around sort of August time where we went, well, that's just completely the wrong approach. We were quite lucky in so much that we had time to speak to other festivals like the Hay Festival, Cheltenham festivals, people who've been trying to run digital programs similar to ours throughout the pandemic. And the one thing that we learned was, anybody who was just doing the paint by numbers sort of approach and just taking what they normally do and moving it online, that's what was failing. So we just scrapped it and just threw our entire program in the bin and started completing from scratch, just focusing on what we could do that was, adapting to the current situation. What were the benefits? What were the barriers? And that sort of navigate around those. So we ended up splitting the program into 3 component parts. Normally the schools program is a very small part of what we do as a festival, maybe 5–10% of our audience. But this year we thought, well, with the struggles with homeschooling, science in particular has fallen way behind. It's much easier to teach numeracy and literacy, but teachers were telling us, that STEM education is quite difficult to do online. So we thought, well, here's a big opportunity to expand, that aspect of the program. It's often been our forgotten child, as we say. So we we split that off into a sort of separate component. And then we looked at our digital program, which was the highlights video we just watched. Was about 100 events spread over 2 weeks. We actually extended the dates of the festival, mostly to give us a greater canvas to sort of play with, because the challenge that we would normally have is we're spread across 90 venues, so there's never, you know, everything's clashing, but you've got all of Northern Ireland to play with. But when you run the digital program, you've got one YouTube channel and you've got, you know, a Zoom account. So extending the dates meant that we had just more of a canvas to play with. And our focus there was, let's just look at the speakers we can't normally get. Let's try to reach the people we can't normally reach. You know, who's the explorer in Hawaii, for example, that we've always wanted to bring over, but it never made any sense economically or financially to fly them over. You know, who's the person that's been too old? You know, referencing Jane Goodall there. You know, we've wanted her for years, but she's 90. It's very hard to get her live. But digitally provided an opportunity to do that. So our focus was very much on the international speakers from across the world, but also then what's the best of local. You know, can we get in behind the scenes at the Wellcome Wolfson Centre, for example, who are running, you know, COVID research? Can we do stuff like that there? So that was our focus really for the digital program. Then we worked very hard on an outdoors program. So I guess the festival was online outdoors is how we built it. And that very much focused on experiential activities, tours, foraging, canoeing, hiking. We planned them on sort of tier 3 level restrictions, sort of 12 people max per group, spread them out over the full 10 days. Now, unfortunately, we obviously got the announcement at the start of January that, you know, any outdoor gatherings even at that stage were stopped. So I don't think we expected that we've been such heavy lockdown in February. I think we thought that there would be sort of tier 3 levels. So a lot of that then had to move to July. But what that program was working, you know, with canoe centres, with existing tour providers, and trying to slot in bits of science into sort of new activities. So, you know, for example, we have a canoe trip down Strangford Lough with the Strangford Activity Centre, but, you know, we've worked with Queen's University with the archaeologists there, and we've identified sort of 3 different drop-off points. So it's a sort of half-day activity, but you hop off at certain points and you talk to an archaeologist about the castle that's behind you or whatever. So, I mean, that's what we generally do with the program anyway. We kind of work with local providers or take something that's kind of an interest in an old building or something and try and inject a bit of science or a bit of expertise from this institution and bring it together with this artist, for example. So that's very much what we did with the outdoors program, which unfortunately has now had to move to July. But and what we did find with that was it was incredibly popular when we launched it. I mean, tickets just went straight out the door. I think people were just, well, everybody's fed up sitting indoors. People are just busting to get out and sort of experience their back doors. And I think there's also you know, we've seen that shift globally where people have, you know, I found it where I've discovered places in my own backyard that I didn't know existed. So we were trying to help, and people have been reconnecting with nature a lot more. So we thought it was the ideal time to focus on an experimental, an experiential outdoor nature program. And this was the year we felt like people are used to us experimenting anyway. Sometimes when you come to the Science Festival, especially certain venues like the Black Box, people expect something a bit weird and wacky. And we thought, well, this is the year to just completely try new formats. You know, so we have marine tours, you know, deep sea diving, things like that there, you know. So yeah, in terms of what we learned, so we'll talk about the sort of the good, the bad, and the ugly of the festival. One of the big things, as I said, was working with international audiences and trying to reach those international speakers. That was so much easier, you know, getting an hour time with a top physicist in America. Normally that would be 4 or 5 days out of her diary, you know, hefty fee, hefty flight, you know, you're going to have to sell out a couple of thousand tickets. But this was just so much easier, you know, the world's your oyster really. But also it's our ability to reach out to international partners. You know, we've always had National Geographic as, you know, one of these key partners that we'd love to get. And I should have said from the outset, the way the festival normally works is it's a co-produced festival, so half of the content is delivered by us and programmed by us, and that tends to be the big stuff that gets the eyes on the product. But then we work with partners throughout the year in a co-design process to help them come up with their own events that then fall under our umbrella. And so there's 48 partners of the festival, but one of those big ones we always wanted to work with was National Geographic. Doing that online was just so much easier, and that for us was, so we ended up producing 4 explorer videos from 4 explorers from across the world. But in my head, that was looking to the medium to long term. Once we get them as a partner, like, what can we do next year in a live setting, or certainly the year after? Can we have an entire National Geographic sort of mini strand of the festival from here on in? So being able to bring in that sort of household name, that household brand, and have the likes of Disney issuing press releases on your behalf was incredible for us. And it resulted then in a massive shift to the way the audience normally works for us. We expected, obviously, it's digital, you're going to get more viewers outside. But if you had to put a gun to my head beforehand, I would have said maybe 20% of the audience would watch out from Northern Ireland, but we crunched the numbers just last week, and turned out 47% of the audience was from outside of Northern Ireland, and that was up from sort of 9% that you would get in normal years. Interestingly, of that 47%, there wasn't that much down south. Like, normally that 9% is mostly a down south audience. It's the day trippers coming up from Dublin. It's the people crossing from Cavan into Fermanagh, or Donegal into Derry. But this year we only had about 3,000 people from down south, but we had like 10 times as many from the UK and the US in particular. And that was because, I think, because we were reaching international speakers and international partners, so when they're retweeting and they're sending out, it's reaching their base as well. Obviously, a digital program is relatively inexpensive to do. We normally spend upwards of 40 grand in venues across Northern Ireland. We get a lot of freebies, but we spend a lot hiring out venues and doing theatre tours. All of that's gone, obviously. There's no flights budget, none of that there. So it's, and even speaker fees wise, speakers were willing to do it for, a very, very nominal fee compared to what we would normally have to pay out. Because, as I say, instead of a 4 or 5 day commitment, it's an hour, on a random Tuesday morning rather than, a week away. So we certainly found the costs, obviously, were way down. But then, of course, the problem with that there is then your ticket sales are way down. We were quite lucky, audiences, when we run it in February, audiences are a lot more receptive now to digital and hybrid events. I think, if you had asked me last April, I was like, who the hell really wants to sit and watch a festival online? But as the years progressed, as we've been in this horrible situation for a long time now, people are just a lot more receptive to really good digital content. The world's your oyster, as I said. It's quite freeing to be able to not think about geography and flights for every speaker, and just going, right, well, let's get that girl in India and just drop an email. Like, it was really, really freeing. The big thing for us was, and the key metric that we wanted to reach was attention spans. Anybody can get sort of, claim 70,000 people if they stick a Facebook video up that's watched 2 times for 2 seconds on average. So the key metric that we wanted to sort of reach was that, could we get a decent amount of watch time per video? And that was the one thing we were delighted with. It was the key metric for us was the average watch time was 26 minutes. And for anybody who's done sort of YouTube videos will know that that's quite high. And we did that through providing interactivity in most of the events. So most of the events, yeah, some were passive and you can watch them again on YouTube. But a lot of the events either had the speaker in the chat or it was live, which just meant that people were staying on for the full duration of the thing. And we like to think, well, the quality was good too, so people were willing to engage and watch it a lot more. I mean, difficulties wise, monetization, I mentioned with most live events, these will all be the same. You want your events to wash your face. We normally run with a scenario where 70%, if we sell 70% of the seats out, that's how we'll base the sort of fee and the ticket sale, or the ticket fee and the fee that we pay the speaker, etc., etc. It's very, very much more difficult to do online. And we normally, it was a really, really strange scenario for us, because normally for us, we lose money when we go out the door because we're an educational charity. You know, we lose money on that sort of coding workshop for kids, you know, that's got 15 kids taking part, but, you know, it's costing us the guts of $1,000 to run. And that's fine, that's what we do, it's the type of stuff that we do. So we normally lose money on that smaller stuff, but then we make money on the big stuff, you know. So when we have the Whittle Hall with, you know, Chris Packham or Alice Roberts or something, and there's 1,000 people there and it's 15 quid a ticket, you're making money off those. And those normally subsidize the smaller things. But this year, those roles were completely reversed. We ended up going mostly with the donation model. We had a charge on some stuff, which was mostly any workshops. So we had, you know, mathematical drawing workshops, we had cooking events, things like that there. And our experience from talking to other partners was, you know, make sure that you charge for those, because although the dropout rate, top 2 seconds. All right.
One of the other things I would say that was probably a positive and a negative was, you know, the whole process was quite a big learning curve for everybody, and we had nothing really to compare it to. So we didn't know whether we were ahead of ourselves in planning, behind ourselves in planning, or what the best way to do things was. So, you know, I think we got lucky and pulled most of it off, and we had a great team supporting us here. But it was quite stressful, sort of January, February time, thinking, am I doing this all right? Have I got the right measure of program, and have we produced this all at a good enough level?
Yeah, and that's the thing, you don't know. I mean, you have those anxieties with a live program, but, you know, as events people, we kind of, you know,
you know that experience.
Yeah.
In this world you didn't know.
But plus also, what I found was difficult was when to program stuff certain times. You know, we know instinctively that's a 6:30 black box gig, that's a 7:30 Playhouse Dairy gig, that's a, you know, Saturday morning event. But when you're running the digital program and the world that we were in, you know, all of those considerations were very, very different. You know, you're suddenly thinking about tea times and about school times and about, you know, things like that there. Although when we spoke to other festivals, you know, like Hay in Cheltenham, and the International Festival, for example, they all said, well, actually, it doesn't matter too much, because only 50% of people were tuning in live, 50% were watching again, and we found that to be exactly the case. But as I say, the roles were reversed from the big shows to the small shows, so we charged for some smaller stuff, but the book talks, for example, we were allowing donations for those, and they ended up, most of those actually broke even. We pulled in about £8,000 worth of donations on the platform. But with the big stuff, you just lost money. And we were, you know, we were working on the basis of lost leaders. You know, we knew that National Geographic was going to lose its money, but wasn't there to make us money. It was there to build a partnership with that brand, you know, for next year. And we do feel we got quite lucky, you know, timing and support wise. You know, the festival is quite well. We've received a lot of great support from sponsors and partners. You know, we've been here for 5-6 years, built up a lot of great partnerships, and we got a lot of in-kind support from people. And timing wise, you know, we got very lucky with the time. As I say, people were more used to digital events at the time we went to run this. Weirdly enough, the fact that it was in a severe lockdown and there was bugger all else to do sort of helped. Like, we ended up moving our schools program forward by a couple of weeks in response to demand from teachers, and that was probably one of the best moves that we made, because, you know, there was a scenario at the start of January, if you cast your mind back, where, you know, suddenly schools are going to be off for 3 months, and, you know, teachers were panicking. So by us being able to respond to that and provide essentially a week's, 10 hours a day for 5 days, content to school teachers. It was just so well, it got to the stage where it was so well received, we had to bring in extra support to manage the bookings because there was that many, and we had to up the numbers that we were able to take for most of the events. So we did get very lucky in a lot of ways with the timing of the festival, with the support that we got from core funders and sponsors and partners. And of course, it's not half as much crack as a live festival. That's the one big difference. Running it, anybody who's ran one of these will tell you this. When you're at your live gig, that's the fruits of your labor. You kill yourself for, a year leading up to the event. You see that audience, you see the look in their eyes, you see the smiles. That's what keeps you going. That's the buzz. So you have that ta-da moment, but with a digital festival, you're just a slob sitting in front of the computer a lot of the time, and you have that sort of anticlimax moment where you close the laptop, and that's the festival over. And it's so instead of sore feet and sore lower backs, you have sore eyes and a sore bum. So it's a very, very different experience. But I've certainly become more of a convert towards what we can do digitally. I mean, what we learned and what we wish we knew before we started this, Sophie mentioned a lot about this, bringing in the expertise. We got great advice from the International Festival about just get a great studio. If you have a great studio, it makes your job a lot easier, because we were spending the summer going, do we need to retrain in, how to broadcast this stuff? Are we going to have to become videographers, etc.? And we just came to the conclusion, stick to what you're good at and subcontract everything else in as much as you can. Being able to hire a studio, we hired Niavac. They shot the events, edited them, and broadcast them for us. So, we were then freed up to just focus on the programming and the marketing of the event. I think the best move, if you had to ask me what the best move we made, was bringing in videography interns. We work with digital creative cultural skills program. Normally we'd bring on an events management intern who's booking flights and things like that there. But this year we thought, well, we were going to not bother, and then we thought, well, let's see if there's any digital media interns out there. And we ended up recruiting. We got, I've spent more time recruiting and interviewing these things than I have interviewing for CEOs. The quality was that good. We had, 69 applications. You would have easily taken 20 of them. These were fresh out of university, from broadcast production at Queen's, for example, who just brought so much to the team. When we were working out their original work plans, we'd, and I'm probably showing my age here, but we thought, well, we'll have 5 or 6 sort of small videos for them to do. But you'd sit them down, you give them a project, they'd have it edited in about half the time that we thought they would. So suddenly the festival was able to grow because we had that extra skill set. So we're able to, go and shoot our own documentaries, which we never thought we'd be doing. We thought we'd just be talking heads in a Zoom call a lot of the time, but because they were able to bring so much skills and not just editing skills, but documentary making skills to the team, meant that the festival and this type of events that we could then do, massively expanded with their skill set. Now, I think that's the one thing that was our best move. And every year there's 60 brand new graduates coming out from broadcast production at Queen's. I would urge anybody to sort of bring in an intern and bring those skills into your team. I mentioned there was a direct correlation between bookings, number of views. Yeah, we found that 50% watching live, 50% watching later. But we didn't see people stumble across the stuff. You could see that direct correlation between people booking tickets. So you'd have 2,000 people booking tickets, and then you'd have almost 2,000 views. Like, you weren't getting randomly, 2,000 people booking and 50 million views. You were getting, so people were just viewing the YouTube channel directly from the booking link. They weren't just accidentally stumbling across it. And I think the big trick that we missed there was YouTube SEO. If we were doing it again, we would have we've been doing some SEO training via Profile Tree. the Tourist Board have kindly provided a lot of consultancy to organisations, and we definitely feel that we could have at least doubled the audience of the festival if we had been tagging the stuff well. And none of it's rocket science. It's about tagging your video as well. It's about naming the video as well. It's all of those little tricks, about 15 minutes per video. And if we had spent the time, or knew to spend the time on that, on those 83 videos that we have up on the YouTube channel, I am 100% convinced that we could have at least doubled the audience. So we missed a massive trick by not really knowing anything about that.
But I will say, we did start with a YouTube channel with about 16 subscribers in September, and I've built it up now to over 1,000. So that was all a big learning curve for us. So
big time, yeah. I mean, we had that big debate. Do you go live? Do you go pre-records? And we sort of thought, well, let's go mostly pre-records, which I think was the best move. So our approach was, I'd say about 80% of the stuff was pre-recorded. That freed you up in terms of scheduling for speakers, particularly with time differences. You were able to do stuff at 7 o'clock in the evening, or 9 a.m. in the morning to go out later that night. It meant the quality was strong. We had not just the studio we were able to edit, but we also had the interns that were able to edit and add in slides and video into presentations, for example. And it didn't really take away from the experience. It didn't feel. A lot of the time we asked the speakers then to, if they could jump into the chat, which created a nice little buzz in the chat feature in YouTube. One thing I'd say is if you're doing any kids content, obviously don't put on the chat. We learned that the hard way, unless you want to get inundated with Fortnite and Minecraft memes. But yeah, pre-recording it resulted in a very smooth running of the festival. Each day was just a piece of cake, really.
It's harder work the 2 months in advance, because you're just recording and editing, and it's just constant. But then when it actually comes to go live, you're just literally waiting for that YouTube countdown to count down and monitoring that, and that's a lot smoother.
Yeah, like you'd almost ran the festival before it started.
I'd done the festival before February.
Yeah. So you were busted by the time the festival rolled around, and I was all fresh going, this is great. So yeah, it kind of shifts things a wee bit, but ensuring the pre-records, didn't take away from the experience, ensured the quality was there, and people will tune out if the quality's not there. That was the experience we got from lots of people. If it looks like it's filmed on a potato, or somebody with their cheek like that there, or it's just breaking off and it's not, you just switch off, and we recognize we're competing with the BBC, with BBC Bite Size, for example, in our world, and unless your quality's good, you're not going to get any level of engagement. So I mentioned donations allowed us to break even for smaller events. Food and drink events work particularly well. We've actually made a profit on all of the food and drink events that we ran, because we ran a sort of two-tiered system. You had 25 people in the sort of VIP aspects. So, for example, we had Andrew Smith, who was a finalist in the Great British Bake Off, and he was doing a live cooking event. So 25 people paid for a sort of VIP ticket where they were on a Zoom call directly with him. But then we had another tier where people could pay a $5 and just tune in and watch. So not interacting and not able to hold their cakes up and show Andrew or anything like that there, but they were able to just cook along in the background. And when we had that two-tier system, we actually ended up making money on most of the food stuff that we ran. Well, all of it actually, all of the food and drink events. There's a lot of strands of the festival going forward that we will end up remaining digital. The schools program, the level of demand that we had from that there, it overcame all of those barriers that we normally have with the schools program, which is, teachers' time, able to take buses out of schools to come to an event, or the logistics of getting performers to jump from school to school. Like, if you had to ask me now, I would say going forward, our schools program is probably going to be 70% digital. The main program will, we do want to go back live and maybe have 10-20% of it digital. But with the likes of the schools program, and say, we have a lot of events on climate change, it makes no sense for us, and it's hypocritical for us to fly a climate change expert from New York to Belfast to talk about climate change. So, you know, for those kind of events, you're going to see that expert beamed in on the screen, along with, you know, a local panel of experts, for example. So I've went from being a complete skeptic to digital festivals, someone who just hated the idea. It was like, I want the buzz, I want the excitement, nobody cares, how are we going to stand out, to now, how do we take over YouTube? We need to do more of this, this is really exciting. And we got all the feedback we got from the audience. You know, Sophie mentioned accessibility in the last talk, and that came through massively in our audience survey. People saying, you know, I'd normally go to one event at the festival because it's a full day out, but I was able to tune into 8 different things. You know, obviously the accessibility of international ones, and people who just can't make it to certain events for, you know, either disabilities or location or anything like that there. So that's a big reason why I think we'll always keep a strong digital presence. You know, I mentioned we were quite lucky. We were very lucky in so much that, you know, you know, we do science. You know, we try to capture the entirety of human curiosity and innovation. So we're able to adapt to almost anything. You can find science in almost anything that you do. So, like, I am conscious that we're talking about, you know, the success of an online program, but our stuff was always going to work quite well online if we were smart about it. We would have done a few shorter pieces on the likes of Facebook or Instagram. You know, we noticed the watch times on those were short, but if we were doing it again, we would have produced a few more sort of bite-sized 5-minute videos for those channels, and we kind of ignored those channels, which was a bad call. But finally, one thing that stood out for me was the fact that, you know, we had the big names. We had Tim Peake, we had astronauts, we had Jane Goodall, we had National Geographic, but it was the local interest angles that got the biggest views and the most interest. So, for example, we had one of the interns done a small documentary series on linen. One of them done a small documentary series based on open water swimming, you know, which was filmed up in Helens Bay. Combined, both of those videos got more views than the Tim Peake, the astronaut, and the 4 National Geographic talks combined, which was remarkable. We would never have predicted that. So flying a drone into the old broken down linen mill in Lisburn got loads of attention online, whereas, you know, something else didn't. So the big names, we always say the big names is never what sells our festival, it's always the topics. But we found that was even greater this year. Not that you don't need the big names, you still need them for press, for people to kind of go, oh, you know, such and such is speaking at it, and that certainly helps. But definitely those local interest angles were a real key for us. So I think that's us. Is there anything else, Sarah, that I forgot?
I think that's it. We're probably having a chat now with Leslie.
Yeah.
If we've any time left.
Sorry.
Sophie, if you want to jump back on as well. Yeah, we're running out of time, but I don't think I think it's important enough that Barry doesn't shut us down. We'll run over by 5 minutes or so. Actually, quite a lot of the questions that we have been answered, particularly when you came to talking about the challenges and the good and the bad. So, but some of them haven't. So I'm going to try and get through as many as possible. One of the things, Chris, that I think a lot of people watching will want to know, if they're sitting there with an event that has always been a live experience, where do you start? Like, what was your thought process, or what was the first thing that you did, or how did you make that decision? Right, we're not just going to let this lie dormant. We're going to make it happen. How do you do that? What's the first thing you need to do?
Yeah, I think the moment was around sort of July, August time, and I don't know. It was partly viewing other festivals that had sort of failed a bit online, that we tuned into that were a bit rubbish. But it was also, you know, a bit of a break in July, and able to sort of, you know, take a bit of time off and reflect. Our thought process was start with a complete blank sheet of paper. not just go back to, what brought us to the dance and what's made the festival so good in the lead up to this, blank sheet of paper looking at the barriers and the opportunities that this weird world brings us, and that's why we thought, well, let's just reach out across the world. Let's try and get these other partners that we could never normally get, and kind of make a virtue of the barriers a wee bit. So yeah.
I think it was a lot of talking with the team as well. It was all of us talking constantly about, what we'd seen and what had worked well and what hadn't, and what other things we were enjoying outside of festivals and things. What online activity were we actually going, oh, that was good and that was enjoyable. How do we take that back into what we're doing? And I think also bringing the interns on and getting them to make their own. We were being a production studio ourselves by making our own stuff that can live outside of the festival. So I think that was the change for us, that point, really. So
I suppose that's actually another important consideration, and something that's that keeps coming up is, like, you make a decision to do something with a really well-established event, really well-established festival, and did everybody come on the journey with you in terms of the Science Festival family, the stakeholders, or did everybody embrace it, or did you get resistance in any quarters?
Well, I wouldn't say resistance, but there was and we had to accept that not everybody could or would come on the same journey. Like, out of those 48 partners that we normally work with, we knew that half of them were in furlough, for starters. So getting that used, normally, as I say, 50% of the program is co-designed with partners. It was probably 20% this year. Most of it was driven by us, because some of them, didn't have the capacities to get their sort of heads around things. And yeah, so I wouldn't say everybody came on the journey. I think everybody eventually embraced it. Once we'd sort of, we did work a wee bit, I should have said too, we did work a wee bit around October and started producing some content for online in an attempt to build up the channel, but also to sort of, take a small dive into it ourselves to kind of figure a lot of the systems out.
I think that's a very important point, to kind of try it once and see, what are the pitfalls and how did it work for you? And we were quite surprised.
Pressure,
but it's definitely, you're going to retain it as a hybrid event going forward. That's one of the lessons learned. No matter what the future holds, no matter if all the restrictions are lifted, are you still going to keep some virtual aspects to it?
Yeah, I think it depends on the strand of the program. All of our hands-on learning stuff, of course, it's going to be hands-on. What we're all about impact, and like what style of an event has the best impact. Face-to-face is always going to have a better learning experience. But as I said about the schools program, it got rid of those barriers around buses and things like that there. Climate change events will always be sort of hybrids. So yeah, it's completely changed how we'll do certain strands of the program. We're busting to get back live for most of the stuff that we do, and we're busting to get out to big theatres and sort of smaller venues, and from the Ardo one to the Playhouse to the Nerve to wherever. So yeah.
You talked about when it comes to the financial side of things, because again, if you haven't stepped your toe in that world, I think that can be quite scary. And I think Sophie's presentation was great in demystifying a lot of that. You can do it yourself, or you can get a production company in, and those are things that budget is a really big consideration. And you talked about where costs were reduced, so venue costs, speakers. What about income? What about revenue generation? Like, was that more of a challenge than it would be with traditional?
Yeah, I mean, we were pretty lucky in so much that the statutory funders that support us, Belfast City Council, Derry Council, Department for the Economy, for example, still stuck with us. I don't think we could have. We don't think we'd even be here if they didn't, because normally a quarter of our last year in the 2020 festival, a quarter of our income was ticket sales, and 3/4 was sort of grant fund and sponsorship. And so we immediately lost you know, that ticket income. We were able to bring in, yeah, 8 grand in donations. That was lovely. But we also lost then what we would often do is, you know, sort of sponsorship strands for you know, for corporates, for example. So here's 4 or 5 packaged events, you know, for 5 grand or whatever. We lost all of that because, you know, we weren't able to have that same impact online. So it was a massive problem for them. We count ourselves very, very lucky. Like it's a very different model. Like I'm also part of a arts festival, and you know, half of our income would come through ticket sales, or 60, sometimes 70% in some cases would be ticket sales, and that's a very different scenario. So yeah, we were pretty lucky that we had statutory funding.
You talked quite succinctly about the things that you wish that you'd known and what the challenges were. But you spent quite a lot of time talking about the YouTube thing. So if you had to pull one thing out that you wish you'd known, is that what it would be? Is it, or is there something else that you're like, well, if we'd known that, it would have been a whole different kettle of fish?
I mean, obviously, if you knew that the way the pandemic was going to go, you would have programmed things. You wouldn't have had that scramble at the start of January to kind of shift, because we suddenly overnight had to shift, you know, 80 events, you know, in the space of a week. So when you count up the outdoors program and the schools program, you know, it was about 80 events we had to move. So obviously, if you knew that, but yeah, YouTube SEO was the big one for us, I think. Do you agree, Sarah?
Yeah, and I'm possibly missing a trick putting things on Facebook and Instagram, you know, little short videos and things. I think we missed a trick there because we just concentrated on YouTube for most of the stuff, or Zoom.
I mean, I don't know if you agree, Sophie, but I think that kind of trying to, with traditional events and in the traditional world, trying to use online tools, social media tools, inexpensive ways of getting your content out there is important, regardless of what kind of world we're living in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know I did touch on it earlier, but I think that, you know, as you know, both Sarah and Chris have said, there's so many different mediums to capture people, and different people are going to be engaging with you through your website, to Facebook, to Twitter, to YouTube, and it's getting those people interested and then also engaging with them all the way through. So from that early stage of drip feeding your marketing to actually doing the event, to your post-event, you know, engagement, come and see us next time. But yeah, absolutely, it's so important. And I think so many of them, especially social media, is seen as a pastime, and it's not, you know, it's not always seen as a huge business tool, but it really is. And yeah, I think the guys have mentioned a few times now, especially during lockdown, everyone's on all the time, so you might as well get in front of them. Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
And just lastly, because again, I'm conscious of time, Chris, you mentioned that back at the beginning, you were able to look at other events that had happened and talk to other festival organisers. And I suppose people that are watching will be thinking, you know, I'd love to be able to quiz other festival organisers. Were people open to talk to you and to share?
Totally. Yeah, massively so. And I think it's just that, you know, we're all of the same tribe. We're all trying to navigate through this weird, wonderful world where we didn't have any pre-relations with Hay Festival, for example. We were able to talk to them and they were happy to share. You know, we had pre-existing contacts with Cheltenham, etc. But no, we found anybody that we contacted to was more than willing to give us half an hour of their time just to sort of talk through what went wrong and what didn't. That was massive. You know, we're happy to give that to anybody now, because to pay that favour forward, so if anybody wants to contact us, let us know. One thing when you say about one thing in terms of what we do different, just a small one, like we had some massive partners on board and we didn't utilise their social media channels as well as we could have. So for example, we had an event with the Royal Society. Now they have about 70 to 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, but we hosted it in our channel instead of theirs. And if we had hosted it in theirs, we would have got far bigger. Same with National Geographic. They have 60 million followers on Facebook, for example. This is just Nat Geo UK. And we should have co-streamed them on our YouTube or their YouTube. And then there's no post-festival. Nat Geo have said that they're going to host those 4 events on their big channel. So suddenly we'll jump from a few thousand views to tens of thousands of views overnight for those 4 talks. But if at the time we should have, we just thought, just host everything in our channel, sure, it's grand. you know, we didn't think, and that was stupid for us. Like, we should have picked up on that.
Well, I wouldn't say it's stupid. I would say that's just the learning curve. And I'm going to wrap things up just by saying that we're really grateful that we've all had the opportunity to learn from the three of you today. So thank you all very much. I'm going to just do a quick wee bit of housekeeping before we finish. First thing I'm going to do is a couple of live polls. If everybody could just bear with us for a couple of minutes. So we're just going to bring up a question here. How have you found today's session so far in terms of content and relevant to your business? So that's a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being not relevant at all and 5 being extremely relevant. So if everybody could vote on that before we finish, that'd be great. Okay, lovely. And then the second one, final one, is, do you plan to take any action within your business as a result of what you've heard today? And that's just a simple yes or no. So quick vote on that. Okay, so finally, all these webinars are going to be made available online, and the people that have registered and those watching will receive an email telling you where to find that. And that email will also give you details on checklist that Sophie has produced, which is a great, like a one-pager go-to. These are things you need to be thinking about. So a really good tool to share with colleagues and to act as a reminder. We're also offering limited one-to-one sessions, only with Sophie, although you heard Chris's offer earlier. So again, details of how you can avail of Sophie's time will be within that email. And lastly, and for certainly I think in the fore of our minds, the most important point of that email is the evaluation form. So if you could just take a couple of minutes and fill that in, that would be great. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks to everybody for joining us on this session. We hope you've taken away at least one useful thing. I certainly have a brain full, and we'll look forward to the time when we can do this together in a live event space. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,